All right, guys, welcome back to Drat Drake, episode 14 or 15, something like that.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's been I guess we're posting every week now. Of course, we got a few episodes stocked. At this part, we are catching up, and we went to VMX recently. Of course, we should have taken more pictures and started actually posting it for the podcast just so people could know. But yeah, we spent a lot of time together that week.
Huh? Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, you got to, I think you've already met Mika before, but you were able to see her a lot more.
Got to hang out a little bit.
Yeah. Now, I went to VMX as a vet student. I was the NAVC student representative. Admittedly, I actually wasn't really the best, and I apologize, just because there was apparently a lot of things I should have done, but
like
don't know, I didn't do it. It either wasn't clear to me, or I just didn't make it clear. I actually genuinely don't know. But anyways, you get like a dedicated parking spot at Ross, which I never knew. So I never even got the parking spots. There's that. But one of the benefits is they fly you out as a student to go to the convention. And this is the last year they had it wherever they had it before they moved it to Orange County Center. And there's a student rep from all the vet schools around the world. I had the best time. I met all the student reps. They were like the coolest people ever. Obviously, you have your stuck-up schools, which I'm not going to mention because they didn't want to hang out with us. But everyone else, we had a blast. I met like some awesome people. Even now, we're still very much interactive on social media. So I have a very already positive bias. Obviously, we graduated, and I haven't really been able to go to any conferences in person since COVID and all that. So this is my first time doing it. I had a really good time.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It was my first time going there. So I knew it was a big conference, but it was cool to compare it to, say, Western Vet, which is also a really huge conference. But the exhibits were insane. So it was like a whole carnival of everybody in the whole vet industry was there. It was crazy.
Wild. Yeah. It was wild. And of course, we'll get into the exhibits because there's a couple that we noticed that we want to give a shout out to. Yeah. Speaking of, though, you're looking out as we walk around, you're constantly scanning people with what tags they are with their vets. I want to say more than 50% are either veterinary assistants or technicians and exhibitors.
Yeah, I was really caught off guard by that. Which it makes sense, right? Because they need CE. So there's a conference somewhere that they're going to, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right?
And I'm glad
there's more technicians than vets.
I'm glad that there is a place for technicians to be able to have some quality CEs. I know you mentioned from, I think, one of the first podcasts we did, you talked about how CEs, the standard of just trying to bring it up a little bit to that next level, was something you were looking for. You think with VMX they maybe did a little bit better, or what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, admittedly, I was going to a lot of the same ones that you and Pam were going to.
That's true.
Because I guess I'm not accustomed to going to a lot of behavior related ones.
Fair.
So I don't really have a great basis of comparison. But I would say that at least the ones that we went to, I felt were fairly informative.
That's good.
They had stuff that I felt I learned, which, again, granted, I think baseline level of specialized behavior centric knowledge, I was probably starting from a little bit more of a basic spot, right? So
no one really learns about it.
So. Yeah, you get what, a semester?
At best, if you're lucky.
Yeah, so I think that it was a lot of good information. And there were definitely still some talks that I felt were the bare minimum of what I would consider an informative CE. But granted, for one person, they may feel it's not all that informative. For someone else, it may have some information they didn't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I was pretty satisfied with the experience.
I was impressed. And of course, we talked about this and we reflected on this while there and even afterwards. But I would say it's pretty well run.
It's a polished
convention.
It's a polished event, for sure.
Yeah. And we were talking about the app, which in its own method was quite challenging and frustrating to use, but ultimately was pretty helpful and very useful.
Yeah, because it's something that in 2024, apps have been around for a while, but I would say that's the first time, at least that I've been aware of, that there's been an app where you can watch the CE outside of the actual room where it's occurring,
live,
but still be on site in the convention center, to where it makes it easier for, say, someone with a baby like you guys to be able to not be in an area where it could disrupt others, but still participate in
Exactly.
real time. So
The
props to
app
VMX for putting that
developers.
together. And yeah, it was a good idea for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you where, 2024, the argument is we need to have, our expectation nowadays for these things should be a really well polished product. And of course, every year they have to throw things together and update it. For the most part, as you were saying, being able to live stream dozens of videos at the same time on one application, I was pretty impressed by it. Now, the
Yeah.
fact that I couldn't rotate and do landscape and the sizing was all off, it was a little bit frustrating. But for the most part, again, yeah, very
You
impressed with their tech.
take what you can get from it. It was still
Yeah.
good. But
So yeah, let's get into some of the talks. Again, we can go a little bit into the medicine. I think one of the ones, of course, one of the first ones we saw was some behavior ones. Dr. Julia Albright, one of the behaviorists, of course, my wife has a good relationship with. The one was essentially the feline stress conversation. That was pretty helpful. One of the big things that we weren't really sure of is actually, I don't even think she's oh geez, I think she's a behaviorist or is an internal medicine specialist. That's not on me to have to memorize. But
just cut that part.
I know we're
it's
gonna
it's
keep it.
in.
You have to own
It's
it.
in there.
The cool thing was there's a conversation about obviously gabapentin's heavily used in cats. However, because it's metabolized by the kidneys, there's this question of how safe is that with cats with CKD. And when in Dr. Albright's conversation in her talk, she mentioned that she still prescribes it relatively at a lower dose, but it's nice to hear from an internist that this is still usable despite the underlying illness.
Yeah, it always makes me wonder, and I'm sorry this is tangential, but
Sure.
it's you have to wonder for a lot of these drugs that we prescribe to what degree we should be modifying our dosing depending on things like CKD, underlying liver dysfunction, things that theoretically should affect his metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
But then I always think back of when human med, it doesn't seem, at least from what I'm aware, it seems like it's dosed per human.
Yeah.
It's not even dosed on your weight. And yet here in vet med, we're doing by weight and then also by metabolic cofactors that are involved. And it's cool. And
Yeah.
I feel like it's what we should be doing, but it always makes me wonder
I guess
the
I have
drugs
no
that
idea.
we're taking, are we doing this
I
properly?
I would imagine that they still do dosages specific to the individual human in human medicine. I
You
guess
would
I can't
think, but
say.
I
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess just granted, I'm not someone that has been prescribed a bunch of meds as a
Mhm.
human, but from other people that I have known, it seems like it's dosed by
Per
the person, right? It's not,
Yeah.
oh, as a person
Interesting.
weigh 190 pounds, your dose is going to be like, it doesn't seem like that,
Yeah.
but
I
I don't know.
guess
Maybe I'm wrong.
probably just the disparity of people is a little bit less than the disparity between breeds and species of animals.
Sure.
And I guess there's different metabolism between cat and dog. I guess that'd be my thought process. But that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. No, it's something that I wonder a little bit with gabapentin too, because I know that with the attention around human abuse potential for the drugs that we prescribe.
Yeah.
It's something that it always scares me a little bit when there's meds that I think do have the potential of coming under the microscope if more than they already are in the future. And yet we're finding all of these benefits for potentially further applications to where it is useful for cats with stress related, issues that can also help to treat patients that have CKD, other applications that we haven't really been using it for.
Mhm.
And I worry, are we attaching ourselves to something that potentially is going to get taken away or remove the accessibility in the future? Or is it potentially better that we're doing this because it provides further justification to say, look, we can't just lock this down and remove it from veterinary practice because of all of these applications that are necessary and valuable to treating patients effectively.
That's a good point. I think
I
the
don't
only
know.
the
Yeah.
only example I can have in comparison to what was threatened and changed was tramadol back in
Yeah.
2012. I remember because that
Was it that
essentially
long ago?
I remember it
Oh,
might
is
have
that one
been.
of those I'm getting old type
I
thing?
know. I remember I was still an assistant, and that's when it started happening. It was like one day we started having to log it, and it was just a huge pain. So we
Yeah.
stopped using it as much, which is good because people started abusing tramadol. I was over in San Diego, so there definitely were people doing it. And,
Really?
okay, my dog needs a refill of it, and so we started compounding it into a liquid, and then that would obviously stop the people from wanting to get it just because now it tastes like liver or
Make it
something.
tuna flavor and
Exactly.
liver.
Exactly.
I mean,
And
that'll
I guess
only stop some people,
it only
right?
stops
But
some, but I guess enough. Yeah, that was, and I think with our generation as veterinarians too, us going to vet school, I'm pretty sure the way we learned about tramadol really wasn't as effective. So I guess it's at least for like pain. So
right,
I
that there's a question to what degree it's actually controlling pain,
exactly.
especially in like dogs, which is our primary use for it. But I I wonder too if it's something that as we've transitioned away from it, and especially with those concerns about human abuse potential, if to what degree are we motivated to say, okay, let's also try to step away from it because of those other simultaneous issues? I don't know, but I worry about gabapentin having that
It's
same fate in the
yeah,
future.
and I think people are already talking about it. I think there are people
Yeah,
who are trying to push for it. This is
yeah.
like the ketamine of 2020s.
Yeah, it's just sad because it's fundamentally there is a huge need for effective analgesics in vet med
Mhm.
because pain is a huge component of what we're looking to fix. And yet it's challenging to find an analgesic that doesn't have abuse potential in humans,
And doesn't have a bunch of side effects long term, right? Like you can only give so
right?
much NSAID or steroid before it
Exactly.
becomes problematic.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's a frustrating spot to be in.
yeah. The other argument is there are vets who don't really believe that gabapentin truly has analgesic effects, and
Right.
they primarily think it's more for anxiety or sedation. So
Yeah.
it's a tricky one. Dr. Albright also mentioned obviously prebiotics and probiotics, and of course husbandry. She was very open about how this is sponsored by Purina, and of course Purina sells the what is it? It's the Calming Care, which we've used before, as well as the Fortiflora, which is probably the most popular one that veterinarians know about. Yeah, I mean we Pam and I have actually used Common Care for our dog just because the whole idea is that, and this is the same for people, right? There's the bacteria in our gut has an influence in the chemistry of our brain. So if they can alter that, you might be able to reduce the stress with our animals. And apparently it has been shown to help. Anecdotally for our pet, I don't think we've noticed a significant difference, but it's definitely out there. Common Care.
I
Sponsor
mean,
this video.
whatever strategies that can work to help.
Now, pivoting a little bit in from diet, or actually on the same topic of diet, Sarah Jablonski had a really good talk. I think this is one of my favorite ones, at least the most informative, because
The
she
PLE
mentioned
one.
the PLE one, the one with
Yeah.
refractory PLE. I thought that was great. Yeah, why don't you give me your thoughts on it since it's also one of your favorites?
Yeah, it was eye-opening to me the degree of diet's effect on how what our treatment options are for PLE, right? Because I think fundamentally, at least for me, I think I looked at it as steroids, other immune modulating strategies. Like those are going to be things that really drive an improvement in
Mm-hmm.
the condition, which it's still a condition that it's not like you prescribe those drugs and you're free and clear. It's a condition that has it's not a prognosis that you're exactly happy to give owners. But the diet was something that I think previously was not as prominent in my mind as far as I think it's something that you're aware of, but the degree to which we should focus on that prior to really resigning ourselves to medications. It was something that I think really altered my approach to how we're going to treat it, which I think is the intent of the talk, right?
Yeah,
Is to shine light on to what degree we're moving too quickly onto other options before really giving diet its full course of consideration.
yeah, I
So
100% agree. I think the frustration that I have, though, especially in emergency or even when I was doing GP again, was people. We as people, we are so obsessed with our diet and so crazy about it. And again, it comes down to marketing, comes down to like just capitalism, right? These companies in this multi-trillion-dollar business, veterinary and pet business, they see the insane obsession of diet with people and how we translate it to our fur children. And now it's like everywhere you go, it's you need to get this diet because if you're taking this diet, your pet's gonna die. It's so exaggerated, and it gets me so frustrated because one of the number one things I get from a client if when a patient comes in sick, let's say they're here for they have a seizure, right? And they're like, I don't know what happened. My dog's always been sick. I feed him the best stuff. And my knee jerk reaction is like, what does food have to do with their seizure? And of course, I'm still very adamant about the idea that a diet, although is incredibly important, there are government regulations on our macros and our nutrients in whatever food's provided out there, right? There's standards for a reason. That being said, there are these cases where, especially with its GI related protein losing enteropathy, especially if they're not completely steroid responsive or treatment responsive, to hear these success stories where they do a specific diet outside of a hypogenic or hydrolyzed diet, to see successes, yeah, it's definitely eye opening, and definitely then makes me really, it's a struggle because I feel so passionately about just the toxicity of these food companies and the narrative they push. But this really makes me lean more towards trying to be more open about the importance of diets in our pets.
Yeah, I guess I see it a little bit differently. That uh, I see it as there's a lot of factors that go into why people get really emotionally charged about pet foods, right? That
Yeah.
there's the people that, you know, want better ingredients in their pet food. They feel to some degree misled by what has been in pet foods before. And so
Yeah.
there is marketing that absolutely speaks to that and it answers the concerns that those people have had. Granted, there's foods that come out that they're speaking to that, but the actual ingredients and stuff that go into it, all vets can tell you that there's some foods that you're like, this isn't doing what you think it is.
Grain
Um,
free, for example.
yeah,
That's
it's things that, and granted, it's like, how are people actually there? Who do you believe,
yeah.
right? It's you listen to the people that sound like they have your best interests in mind.
Mhm.
So I I get it from that standpoint. And yeah, at the same time, though, veterinarians and people that have more of a medical background, we look at the ingredients from the perspective of what health effects is it going to have. Is there a risk of bacterial contamination to pets, people, like assuming non-ideal conditions for preparation, things like that will alter the calculus of what's safe to feed and
Mhm.
not. I just I think there's a lot of crosstalk going on, and so people come in from whatever perspective they're coming in from, and because there's just this mix of different ideas, you get people that start to feel like I feel very strongly about why I'm doing what I'm doing because I
Mhm.
care, and that starts to breed the kind of the environment we're seeing and
Yes.
stuff like pet food that people really feel strongly about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think too that coming back to the concept of always attributing health issues to the diet, I see that as people just trying to logically think through the problem, right? Because it's something that the food is something you're giving them every day.
Mhm.
You're watching the feces and urine come out the other end, right? And so those are things that you're keeping track of to try to assess, is your pet healthy? Was something changed? Factors going in, factors on the other end. Like,
Mhm.
where is the change happening to
Happening.
where we can explain what's going on? And obviously, that logic doesn't work for
A
health
lot of
conditions.
diseases. Yeah.
But I think it's just people trying to help
Of course.
guide things in the right path,
Of
right?
course.
But it leads to a lot of kind of silly behavior in many respects. But
Yeah.
that's our job to say, okay,
Oh yeah, of
food is
course.
important, but for this
But
specific issue,
let's see if there's
yeah.
something else that might be causing it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
But I guess bring it back from three tangents ago, the PLE talk I think is really a perfect example of the type of CE that I really like to see
Mhm.
because it was a lot of very evidence based. Here are the papers that have been written on this. Here's the evidence that we've shown. Here are the hypotheses that have been tested. Here's a demonstration of how what we're trying to advocate for has actually shown measurable
Yeah.
benefits.
And she even mentioned that there are scenarios where, okay, if you don't Some people don't have the luxury of having an internal medicine consult and an ultrasound and GI biopsies.
Then
And
what?
you do. The albumin's zero
Exactly.
point 0.5. Like, you got to do something.
Yeah.
And for her to say, then in those cases, we still have evidence of that. People went straight to this white fish or sweet potato diet and within days saw improvement. And that
Yeah.
was cool. That was really cool to hear. Funny
Yeah.
enough, obviously, we know Dr. Megan Barrett because we went to vet school with her. And of course, she was one of the first guests on my podcast. She has made a name for herself in terms of holistic, diet related veterinary care. She came out with a book that I have. I still need you to sign it, Megan, if you're listening. It's called From Basic to Bougie, a blueprint to upgrade your pet's diet safely and simply. And she also, and we're in a group chat together, and I don't think she's so humble about this. She has her own podcast with several other vets in the very similar field. It's called the Pet Care Report. And really what it is, it discusses connections with pet experts, obviously, to discover latest trends, innovations, and essential products for optimal pet care. Of course, I'm reading off the screen. I want to do them justice by giving them the specific description that they want people to know. So I would say check them out. Of course, again, Dr. Megan Barrett with her book and the Pet Care Report podcast.
Yeah, you said it. That Megan is doing a lot in the field. It just in general, like
She
she's accomplishing
is.
a ton, and it's just she's very humble about it. Like she doesn't go into our group chat and hey, look at what it's just she's actually doing a lot of really cool things, and
Living in the moment. And
it's cool to watch.
yeah.
Anyone looking to watch what she's doing, she's an awesome vet. She's huge. I'd say
Physical
upcoming.
therapy,
Yeah,
acupuncture. Yeah. And I think we were talking about making an episode about hobbies or side hustles or just jobs completely unrelated to vet medicine that a lot of our colleagues are in. And she came up on the list
she's a
almost as one of them.
DJ,
She's a DJ. She
right?
does. Oh crap.
So cool.
She told me what it was, the fire spinning thing that a lot of
Yep.
that's popular. So we'll give her another shout out very shortly.
Yeah, it's just awesome. It's I want
Cool.
to see more of that in our field. It's good.
Brings a lot of light to it. Now, moving on a little bit into kind of the stuff that we really like, obviously, technology, new upcoming innovative things in veterinary
Is that
medicine.
Mika in the background?
It is, yeah. I think
Yep.
mom's making lunch, and that doesn't sound like a cry. It doesn't sound like her normal cry. It sounds more like
She wants food.
yeah. I think since Pam's making lunch right now, she's probably crying for attention,
Okay.
but not crying to stress. And I'll have to probably edit some of this part out.
Your dad powers to
I know. Yeah, I mean,
read the cries.
she's starting to really tell us, who she is as a person, which is really cool.
It's good.
I promise today's Oma is not about her.
But it's no problem if it is.
Every time, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's being a parent, but
let's get into another talk. First off, actually, I have to award, at least personally, the most entertaining speaker of the VMX conference would have to go to Dr. Craig Webb.
you always know you're in for a good time when it's a web lecture, right?
And of course, obviously CSU professor. I came in fourth year, so I never got to witness any of his lectures, but I've heard things. And you're left feeling. What can you explain to me?
He just takes you on a journey, like the one where he's starting from like
the liver
ancient history. You're like, where on earth are we going with this? And then he ties it back in, and it's just, I don't know. He has fun with it.
He loves his job, and that's great.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, and he's got good timing.
Shout out to Dr. Webb. Now, there was one that, of course, we have a little bit of a conflicting opinion on, which is why I want to bring it up. But there was the future of AI.
Yes.
Funny enough, it's funny because I work with a Dr. Patrick Flynn, who's one of the surgeons at one of the specialty ERs I work at. But when we got in there, I was like, that's not the same Dr. Patrick Flynn that I know. But we're like, you know what? This is a kind of a cool talk anyway.
It's an imposter.
Let's jump in and let's listen to it anyways. So again, I'll start with my thoughts just because, again, ours are a little bit different. He, of course, a big part of it was how, and this is, I think, nowadays, I'm a little exhausted by it, but everyone's talking about AI, and how could you not bring up AI in a veterinary, one of the biggest veterinary conferences out there, right? So of course, he went into like how AI can affect our record writing as veterinarians, but the one that really stuck out for me was the future of pets, for like how the typical person might experience having a pet in the future. His whole thing was they could eventually AI generate a golden retriever or however, right? A virtual animal that no longer gets sick, that no longer has the needs that we typically have to give, but still gives us that kind of emotional connection. And obviously, super like Blade Runner style, crazy way to think about it. But I thought that was interesting. I thought that was probably like one of the most interesting thing that I heard from him there.
Yeah, I interpreted the talk as like more of a fun. All right, we've gone super intense into cardiomyopathy, pulmonary hypertension. Now let's just talk about if robot dogs are going to be a thing in the future. So it
Yeah,
was fun in that sense. But yeah, I agree with you that the whole narrative around AI, it definitely it's new, right? So people are excited about new things. There's definitely, I think, a lot of fear being generated just out of marketing and clicks, and just it's being done just to get people going. And I think a lot of I think everyone's a little exhausted by the fever pitch that it's reached. But
yeah,
ultimately, AI is something that, and specifically what we're talking about with AI, is largely the large language models.
yes.
The fact that we have the transformer model for neural nets that's able to produce very convincing language and parrot a lot of knowledge from a machine. It's cool, right?
Can you
So
actually, just for the audience, can you actually break that down and explain that a little bit better or a little bit more?
yeah, it's something that the what people are talking about with AI, and largely this started with ChatGPT being released. And the whole concept that you look at is like the HAL 9000 or
Mhm.
whatever from, I forget the name of
Space
the movie,
Odyssey.
2001 Space Odyssey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you have this hyper intelligent machine that's capable of essentially talking to you as another human would. And yet it's been trained on a vast majority of the internet and human knowledge to be able to essentially be this person-like thing that you can interact with and find a whole bunch of useful applications for how can we get this robot to diagnose things for us? How can we use them to talk to people about how to do their taxes? Like, where are the applications going to come from this? But I think ultimately it's a little silly in my eyes because if you look at the underlying process that's going on, essentially what they're fundamentally doing is creating a neural network that is capable of essentially parroting the pattern of written text
Mhm.
in such a way that is essentially guessing the next likely words and phrases given a prompt and given the previous words that have been said. And in doing so, you can produce fairly relevant and contextually coherent statements. But fundamentally, it's not all that much different from like teaching a parrot how to talk,
Okay.
right? Because the question is, does the parrot really understand what's being said, or is it just saying things that you're like, oh, yeah, that's actually correct and it sounds good? And I think it's just being done on such a large level that I think when we start getting into discussions as far as does it feel anything and stuff, I think we're getting into a little bit of a silly, you know, uh, science fiction type realm, right? We're
Mhm.
not there. But I think specifically going back to the talk for these dogs that you put a little robot dog together and then you put these neural networks into them where essentially instead of predicting speech, you're predicting the movements of a dog, right? Because you encode it as walk around and bark and basically act in a way that you would expect for a dog. And are people going to be satisfied with that? And the next conclusion that comes from it that he spoke about, of course, was like, okay, if it's a robot, then it doesn't need veterinary care usually, right? It needs a mechanic or
Yeah.
a programmer.
Yeah.
It's I think it was just a fun talk to say, okay, I'm sure they will eventually come about, but I think there is a fundamental connection with another living being that I question Is that able to be fully replicated to a way that humans are able to connect in the same way with a robot dog? I'm skeptical,
Oh,
to be honest.
I
I
think
think most people
at this
are.
time, I don't think it's feasible. But then
Yeah.
again, hey, there are people out there in certain countries that are marry a pillow and have a video game wife or something like that.
Yeah, but
Those are niche, but it's
is
growing,
that
right?
going to challenge the industry
Yeah,
on a large level? Probably not.
not during our generation, but who knows in the future.
And tech moves fast, man.
It
But
does move fast.
yeah, the big event that is the big one that people are postulating on is the tech singularity, where you have AI capable of further advancing AI, right?
Oh,
So AI is able to code itself to then, because at that point, then it's operating as fast as
is
computers can,
yeah,
right? So then that's the question is that going to happen in 5 years? Who knows? But yeah, it was definitely a talk where I could hear some of the people around me sitting there being like, oh, that's ridiculous, and making these comments throughout it. But I don't know. I didn't take it super
yeah,
seriously. And I think overall, the AI thing, I hope will calm down in the near future, because I think it
yeah.
is an obsession on a societal level that we just need to get through. I think AI as a whole will be perceived as commonplace as just technology overall, right? There's going to be AI on multiple levels. A lot of them won't even be visible, right? It'll be on the back end behind websites that you're using, software that you're using for different applications. And there's no need to then advertise the fact that it has AI, because everything's going to have AI, right? It's like the ones that 20 years ago were advertising that they have SQL, which is a database language.
Mhm.
It's like now
No one would ever say
advertise
that.
that fact because it's just whatever. So I think it'll go the same way.
Yeah,
The AI things will just become
it's just
commonplace.
a fad term right now
Yeah.
that people are really blowing up. I agree.
So
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we went to the exhibit hall, and of course, we mentioned earlier a bunch of exhibitors. This again, multi-trillion-dollar market. Pretty. It was pretty
is veterinary
overwhelming.
multi-trillion? I thought it was.
I thought,
I don't think the
am I
veterinary
lying
market's that
about
big.
this?
I think it's a lot
Okay.
smaller. I
I
remember the vet market overall, like vet services, I want to say was only like a $30 billion market. Like it is not that big. And I want to say even the AI talk, I think he said that just the vet, like pet everything, I think is only $100 billion. I don't know if that's globally or in the US, but yeah, trillions to me is like the real estate industry or something insane like that.
all right, you're right. 300 billion.
That's still really big.
Yeah. So
300?
I stand
Wow.
corrected, guys. Not trillions, hundreds of billions of dollars in this market. Okay, in the pet industry, not just the vet. I think the vet's probably. I think you're right. A third of that, but then 300 million is
It's still a very small industry. Yeah.
yeah. I wouldn't say that small, but so obviously with the it was pretty overwhelming and busy. I remember as a student when I was there, I spent so much time there because you get all this free swag, and we didn't have time, especially with the baby. And I apologize, she's
Which
still crying. We're
which
still vocal. Hmm?
how do you feel about the amount? I don't know, because I got the bag of stuff
Yeah.
and I felt bad because this I get that every business wants to put their token items in there to try to gain further customers and stuff. But to me, I don't know, like a lot of the pens and the booklets and stuff that you get, you can find a use for them, but I feel like to some degree we're just contributing to pollution in
Oh,
your house and then just the
100%.
world. So
100%. Fortunately, a lot of the things were recyclable. They went
yeah,
straight into my recycling, but
I don't know what a good alternative is for that, right? Because if you just tell people like, oh, go on this website where everyone has a little piece of it, I'm thinking of what's the old like early 2000s website where it was like everyone could buy a pixel for $1 and the guy had a
oh
million
yeah.
pixels for sale. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Hmm.
If we did an equivalent of that, I don't think anyone would use that. No one would go on
No.
there voluntarily. So they have to give you something, put it right in front of your face. Here's a bag of stuff that
Yeah.
you're going to look at. But like at the same time, it is wasteful. I
It
don't know. I
is.
don't
And it's
like a lot of what
as a
I don't
society,
know.
we judge things based on stuff, right? Sometimes,
Yeah.
and there's obviously the hoarding issue. I think we're also, as veterinarians, we're in a different place too, because we do, although someone, many would argue, and to many certain degrees, we're not as well financially well off as other professional medical professionals. But for the most part, if you're a veterinarian, we're sustainable. So the idea of things, sometimes we have the luxury of saying, oh, we don't need these things. I noticed that a lot of the people in the exhibiting halls who really were taking advantage of the swag and all the free things tended to be the nurses, the techs, and the vet students.
True.
Right.
Yeah. Like I said, there's definitely you pick through it and say, oh, can I use this little booklet to potentially take my rounding notes in and try to
Yeah.
do what you can with it. But yeah, I think that was one of the things I felt a little bit
Mm-hmm.
eh,
Yeah.
bad about was getting that. And I was just like, as an industry, can we do better than this?
I think we can, because I'm very much in the same place as you. I actually wonder, though, statistically, like, all right, so what's the, you look at like the cost of a certain swag article and what the chance, like, where's the return on that? Because I don't even know if there's metrics that we have access to, because there was one company that was giving out a free Yeti. Whoa, okay, hold on, that's a Yeti. I'm gonna spend 20 minutes and get in line for that. But what does that company really sit? Did I just get real estate in my head now about this? And what's the value of that versus what's the cost of it? I have no idea, but the fact that people keep doing it probably shows that there is value to it.
I'm sure that's been studied to death, right? Like
Oh
advertising
yeah.
as an industry,
That's a multi-trillion dollar
like
market.
yeah, there you go. You have one. No, I'm sure because it's a hard thing to measure, right? A brand impression. How do you measure that? I guess you can measure it just in terms of conversions to revenue growth, but then the question is what other factors contributed to that, right? I am sure there are very smart people who have done a lot of work to find out if it's worth it or
Oh.
not. I think as a whole, it's probably one of those things that on an aggregate level, if everybody's doing that, it's probably not moving the needle for any single one of them. But if you don't participate in that,
Mhm.
you're falling behind, I think is the way that I look at it.
Yeah.
I think if Yeti cups turn out to be a fairly successful thing for any given company, then everybody's going to start doing Yeti
Yeah,
cups and
totally.
then it's
Yeah.
whatever. But
There's probably also balance with the company, what they're selling, the actual market,
sure.
and the, yeah. Give me a second. I'm going to attend to my baby,
Yeah, absolutely.
and this will be edited out. That's all right.
All good.
Uh, it's a new day, and baby, who used to love the high chair, suddenly decided to hate it after eating. And so at the same time, Pam had to she was messy from all the strawberries and broccoli she was eating, so she had
Oh,
to wash her off, and that obviously
there we go.
didn't make
Yeah.
her happy.
Yeah.
Okay, so pivoting obviously into the marketing aspect, one of the one of the exhibiting halls that we really liked, and then we were there for like 20 or 30 minutes talking to the owners, is Vet Hive,
Mhm.
a mom and pop shop. We obviously have a lot of things to share. It's Kate and Will Baker. They're both veterinarians. The unique thing, of course, and this is again you were saying, is a trend. The the wife is a veterinary specialist. She's a clinical pathologist, and the husband is an ER doctor. And again, me,
It's a
you,
thing.
and then Pam's behaviorist, Steph's an ophthalmologist, and of course now Kate being the clinical pathologist. But here, do you want to talk about what VetHive is and what they do?
Yeah, you talk to them more, but
Oh, that's
from what I gathered, it's essentially a social network dynamic between colleagues, specifically with cases that you
yeah.
can discuss things that have been challenging, cases that you want just a little bit of additional verification from other specialists, right? If you have radiographs that you just want to triple check that you're interpreting these correctly, you have a radiologist that can say, hey, we're on the right track with this, which is extraordinarily useful
Yeah.
because it's one of those things that any given person going through veterinary education and then having cases to draw on from experience, like it's a finite number of case exposures that you and medicine is one of those things that there are always going to be rule breaking cases that don't read the textbook, they don't follow your expectations, they're going to deviate from what you've been taught is the expected outcome for any given disease process. So having a crowdsourced type model for medicine
Mm-hmm.
is a very useful thing, right? And giving an effective platform where people can discuss cases effectively, I think is an extraordinarily useful thing. They are absolutely meeting the demand for that kind of platform.
Yeah.
So I think they hit the mark really
I
well
like
on
it.
that.
We talked
Yeah,
about this a
it
few
looked
years
good
ago.
too.
Yeah, we wanted something that you can speak with someone and get some guidance, but there's also a voting system, a rating system of how good the question is. Very much like a
Mhm.
Reddit based forum thing. And when we saw that, we were just like, wow, this is exactly what we were talking about and like what we've been wanting. So that was a big part. And it's also beautifully done.
Yeah,
The
their user interface
interface,
and just like the
super
layout,
simple.
very nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
no, they are positioned very well to, I think they'll continue growing and they're going to be really successful at it. You look at like the whole, I don't know, this goes back into AI. I was like wondering to what degree are humans like 10 years from now?
mm,
Where is that going to fall into place where we're contacting other people versus consulting a robot that's been trained on the aggregate of all veterinary research and all veterinary data? And I think honestly, one of the problems that I see with the AI component is that veterinary research is, at least compared to human medicine, I think
mhm.
lacking in a lot of respects, right? We always
Yeah.
joke that any given veterinary study, what's the sample size? 10
Yeah.
over 5 years, and the, paradigms have changed on how things have been treated. And a lot of the studies are either done in universities as part of residency. And it's one of those things that having watched my wife go through trying to find cases for a given, I forget what specifically she's trying to aggregate
Mhm.
cases on, but it's challenging, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
our EMRs are not really set up for that.
Mhm.
We don't have the degree of standardization that I assume is present in human medicine. Like we've got a lot of additional challenges. And that's not to say that there aren't smart people doing good work, but it's just they have a lot of hurdles to get over. And the end result is that we have a lot of studies that can be conflicting. And a lot of it is just like, is this just statistical noise? Or are
Mhm.
we actually seeing a different conclusion that's true that we can start to alter our practice on? And I think that then that comes back to the whole thing of can you train an AI on that kind of data? And I question the quality of that.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us back to something like Vet Hive, I think is extraordinarily useful and enduring because there's an argument to be said that people in a career 20, 30 years start to really build an intuition to say, okay, even though we don't really have the strongest research support to justify this, just having been doing this as an expert for the longest time, I can guide you that this is a prudent decision to be
Yeah.
made.
And
Right.
it really going into just mentorship, right? When we talked about this,
Exactly.
it's so hard for vets to be able to have that. So now you almost it wouldn't be fair and to say this is mentorship on a phone, but you have that level of guidance if needed on cases that are troubling.
Yeah.
They're
And
affordable too. So
it actually makes more sense to have it in an asynchronous format to where you have the ability to make a post
mhm.
and then step away from it to then handle the 2 or 3 appointments that are coming up and then come back to it and see someone respond to it without having to sit there on a phone going through the phone tree talking to
Mhm.
it's just it's easier I think on both sides,
Yeah,
so it's a more modern way of doing it. So
agreed.
I have nothing
Yeah,
but good things to say about it.
yeah.
I think it's a good thing.
Now, I think we should probably make a pretty key distinction because, of course, we love all veterinary companies and everyone's made big moves in our industry, which we have to respect.
Yeah,
There
it's a
is,
good industry, right? I don't know,
yeah, for the most
it's a
part,
good group of people.
yeah, there is a comparison that people are having between Vet Hive and Vin, and I would probably there are some comparisons in terms of the fact that they have specialists on both sides that can help answer questions. It's relatively forum based, community driven, but there are some different distinctions. I think that obviously Vin has been around for a very long time and they've established an incredibly really good resume of what they've been doing.
Yeah, it's Vin.
It's Vin. How many three
Yeah,
letter .coms do you have now that are allowed?
yeah. Well,
You
it's
know,
just they've done so much work, and like you said, they trailblazed
yeah,
this kind of thing, and they there's so many branches on what Vin offers, right? They've got like the Vin's
media,
Encyclopedia, they branched into like veterinary partner. They've
their drug book. They have, essentially
yeah,
they have their own. Yep.
they've really cultivated a really strong knowledge base that people call on. I guess I see them as a little bit different.
Hmm.
I think there's a little bit of overlap, right? But I see both of them having a very robust presence moving forward in the
Yeah.
future.
And I asked both
Uh,
owners, is this an inspiration to eventually compete with them? And they're like, no, we're trying to keep our own situation. Our main thing is more so for just specialty assistance and guidance in a very kind
yeah,
of formal yet informal method.
yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah. I think it's inevitable as you have like a knowledge-based
Yeah.
consulting type dynamic in your thing. Eventually, if you grow big enough in the industry, like there is going to start to be a little bit of overlap because I think both of them do CE
Hmm.
as well. So it's
Yep.
something like, are they technically competing in that respect? Sure. But as vets, we need a
We
bunch of
need it.
CE. We're gonna
Yep.
go to both places to get it, right? Like it's nice to be able to get that variety to really augment hearing it from different areas.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I see long term, like they're both
Yeah.
in a really good spot. I think as a field, we really need that. And
Hmm.
honestly, as someone that if I try to put myself in the shoes of like clients coming to vets, like it would give me more security and like a sense of, I don't know, calm to
Hmm.
know that like my vet also has the ability to reach out to these other specialists and consult with them on an as needed basis in an easy way to help with whatever they need help with. To me, I would be like, oh, that's good. And I could see how some people would say, oh, that shows a lack of experience or they're not confident in their knowledge. But like, it's just a fundamental thing. No human is going to have the answers to everything.
Exactly.
And I think as a society, I think we've come to embrace the fact that like network effects and being able to put a bunch of heads together and a bunch of
Hmm.
smart people into one spot, it's going to benefit everybody. And ultimately, the goal is to really continue to improve the quality of what we're doing for pets
Yeah. Just to finish up with what you were saying, with especially with owners, I feel like people nowadays, they obviously there's a value into your knowledge and what you know and your expertise, but bedside manner and the ability to communicate is, I think, one of the biggest requirements nowadays in healthcare. So,
Yeah.
all right,
Well,
let's
it's just
move
it's
on.
not enough to just know things, right? Like
Exactly.
you have to be able to help in a way that number one feels like you're helping. Number two, do it in a way that you're not, that you're achieving the same goal, right? And then it's just, I don't know. The times have changed a little bit. Like you look at clients too,
Mm-hmm.
like they're also crowdsourcing in a way that they look at how many areas
Oh,
they can
totally.
ask questions online with each other and
I
clients
mean,
can give their own experience.
talking about
We
Reddit,
need to
there's
embrace
they
it,
have
right?
Reddit for veterinary stuff too, right?
Yeah.
So,
Like we just need to embrace that dynamic. And I think that anyone who's moving into that sphere in a way that's supportive of that, I think is going to do well.
yeah. Okay. All right, let's move on to our oma sarcoma.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you have yours today? I know
I actually came unprepared.
you
I
came.
have to.
Okay.
You go
All
first.
right.
You
Let
go
me go
first.
first. I'll start with my oma. I'll touch base with you, see what you think. My oma. So lately, because of just with the my work schedule and all that, and baby and all, and Hank, of course, it's been pretty hectic of just trying to balance everything. What I've come to realize is if I wake up early, I can work out, I can make my breakfast, I can take care of the pets all before baby wakes up, and then I can take care of baby and have everything prepared for her while Pam gets ready and has her day started. So I first woke up at 6 o'clock, and that wasn't enough time. So I started waking up at 5, and it's on the days that it actually happens. It's been such a good start of my morning because now I've had everything that I needed to get done is now achieved. Pam's happy because now I've we're in a position where she can really have her routine before I have to jump into work and she then has to take over. So it's for me, it's been such a good thing and it's been such a positive experience for me to wake up early. Obviously now I have to wake up, I have to just go to bed a little bit earlier, but then again now we just don't watch as much TV or we don't do as much scrolling, right?
Which is
We
not a bad thing,
which is not a bad
right?
thing.
Less TV
Exactly.
is usually better. I
Yeah.
know that Steph loves TV, but
I have a lot of catching up
it's
to do though, because there's a lot of stuff that people are talking about that you used to hear, and I'm like, I used to know about it, but now I have no clue. But
yeah, but
that's
it's
what it
always
is.
gonna be there, right? Like it's
You're like
granted,
the
like if
biggest
you're
hermit.
watching, I am, but granted, yeah, if you're like trying to watch Lost in 2024, you're
Well,
not gonna
no,
have many people to
no.
share that with. But like I get the social aspect of watching these shows, but I don't know. It's endless, and I'm like, is this? Yeah, I'm a hermit, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
do I want to spend my life just consuming television? For
Mhm.
me, the answer is no, but I know that other people, it's an enjoyable hobby, if you can call
Mhm.
it that. But
Yeah, it's a level. It's a way of decompressing, and
sure,
I still need that relatively
yeah,
often.
but
My body's used to it.
yeah,
So,
but
do
I'm
you have an
always a
OMA?
fan of less TV. I think my OMA is just I'm feeling really good going into February. I feel just in a very general sense,
Yeah.
right? I feel like the start of 2024 has been a very optimistic, good start to the year for me. So yeah, I feel like I'm
Okay.
on top of productivity, getting a lot of stuff done. Really, I don't have much more to
I'm
say than
happy to hear it.
that.
So Chinese New Year is your OMA because it's
Oh, is
now.
it?
Well, it's
Wait, when
February.
is
So
it?
it's I think it's
Just the
now.
whole month of
Oh,
February?
geez. Now I just look even worse here.
Let's look it up.
Oh, it's this Saturday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's when it starts.
And then how long does it go?
15 days.
Okay.
I just read that actually. I wish I was a better Chinese American, but
Actually, did you Google it and get the fireworks?
yeah, I did. It's cool.
It's a nice touch.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
and you can replay it. Yeah, so
So,
that's my OMA. My
okay.
sarcoma
Mhm.
is I actually don't know if I have one.
All right, let me
Oh,
start with
I have
mine.
one.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
Go
you go
ahead.
first. No,
Okay.
you first. I insist.
I feel bad. So my sarcoma is actually my wife's sarcoma, which
Oh,
is that sounds weird to say, but so
I know.
she She has been having issues with her car that she took it in for service and then had to get a motor mount replaced. And then she also had like a leaky tire that she had to get
I
patched.
remember
And then
that.
another tire had to get patched. I don't
Oh,
know if she just drove through a bunch of construction debris or what, but two tires had to be patched. And it was, I think, weighing her down a
it's
little
a
bit,
lot.
but we're through it now.
Okay.
So I think she's feeling a little bit more relieved, but it was cars break, so it's you expect it, but it's frustrating when you're
Yeah.
going through the moment of it, right? Because it's just that's just another thing on my to-do list. I was gonna relax this Saturday, and now I have to think about a car. So
That's a pretty good sarcoma because yeah, it's and
I
she's
think
going through
my
a residency. It's tough. That sucks. You don't, that's the
yeah, I
last thing
mean,
you need.
your spare time is at a premium. Little things like that, I think, hit you. They affect your psyche a little bit more. But yeah, like I said, we're over that little hump now. So hopefully she's not doing donuts and construction sites
Not
or
anymore.
whatever.
She's learned her
We
lesson.
put a stop to that. But yeah, no, it's all good now.
All right.
So yeah,
Well,
what's your sarcoma?
so it's a little conflicted. I personally don't think it's that conflicted, but of course, as someone, it has to do with unreasonable clients in the
Okay.
veterinary field. So now I'll be the first to really acknowledge that it's a really tough situation having a sick pet. And a lot of people, including myself, see their pets as their own children and family. So when you have someone you love so dearly sick in an environment that's very stressful, these emotions can play out. Like I promise I get that. There was a client that came in over the weekend, and essentially the pet was very sick, incredibly geriatric. Not that age is a disease, but like close to 20 years old. And it came in because it hasn't been eating, it's been lethargic, and its back leg stopped working. So I do it essentially was came in as a stat. In what that means is the front desk or whoever's triaging it will bring the pet directly to the back so it can be evaluated by me or the veterinarian. So there was no communication with the owner at that time, but because of the concern for the pet's life, it had to be first seen and evaluated. The first thing I see, obviously, is this really disheveled dog, smaller breed dog. So we were able to pick it up and take it out of its little bed. Can't use its back legs. Very dehydrated, very lethargic and down. First thing I do when I do my physical exam is I like feel these giant mandibular lymph nodes, right? Then you feel the popliteals. So you see where I'm going with this.
Yep.
For a dog that was, I think it was 5 or 6 kilograms, 2 inches, so like 5 centimeters was the mandibular lymph node. It
Oh,
was crazy. This was like not something you could see it. And I was shocked. And I was like, okay, we need to put a catheter in this dog because we need to do something. This isn't going to be a situation where we're just going to let the dog needs treatment, or I'm going to have a very serious conversation with the owner. So we shave the leg. And then as soon as we shave it, the person who triaged said the owner doesn't want anything done with this dog until unless she agrees to it. And so we don't place the catheter. We already shaved the leg. We bring the dog back to the owner, and she completely loses her mind. She is so distraught and so upset that we had tortured and made her dog suffer. And she was inconsolable. There was nothing that we could have done or said. We were at fault for doing that. And again, I get it. Your dog is sick, and I'm not going to go into whatever discussion she had with her regular veterinarian,
sure.
but this dog was not diagnosed with anything, and it was just on my in my hospital, almost on just looking very sick, and I'm the bad guy for trying to place a catheter and trying to treat it. And she came in just wanting subcutaneous fluids, and it's just that's such it's I've dealt with my fair share of like very complicated situations emotionally or medically, but in a scenario where you understand and she admits, I know my dog's been sick for 6 months, I know it's been declining, I know this and that, you acknowledge this, you say this to my face, that how horribly sick your dog is, and yet for you to then be upset with us, and I'm the one who's now tortured. She said that you tortured my dog. That part is that's been really
Frustrating.
unsettling for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things that I think, especially ER,
Yeah.
right? Like it's you are in everyday situations where damned if you do, damned if you don't,
Mhm.
right? Because I've had days where in the same day, I've had clients be upset that nothing was done until they were spoken to, that they were like, why, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
And in the same day, had people say, why did you do anything before coming to talk? Like in the same day. And it's something that you have no idea who is coming through the door and what expectations are to come in with. And I think it's to some degree a little bit of a lack of understanding that as someone who doesn't know either type of client in terms of their expectations, and obviously that's a very simplistic binary to make, coming in knowing that there are going to be people that feel differently than you do as far as how they want things done, and knowing that the person responsible for those decisions, being the vet,
Mhm.
has judgment calls that they need to make in terms of on the whole, if they see a pet that is in a position where it needs medical treatment immediately, they're going to act on it and do things to try to help. The operative phrase being they're trying to help.
Yeah.
To some degree, you need to be understanding of that,
Oh
even
yeah.
if it's not personally your own
Hmm.
desires. It's something that I think I've seen it, and I think especially some of the older vets that I've talked to, we've seen a deterioration in the ability for people to place themselves in someone else's shoes to say, okay, I see how you made the decisions based on the knowledge that you had at the time to make the best decision to try to do right. And I've seen a lot of that just disappear. There's you didn't predict what I wanted,
Hmm.
even though I didn't say it to you. Therefore I'm allowed to be as angry as I want at you
Hmm.
with no boundaries. And I think that's where I don't know what the solution to that is, but it's a difficult position to be in on the other side. And like you said, these are emotional situations, and it's concerning pets that absolutely they're a huge part of our lives, right?
Hmm.
Like it's you don't want anything bad to happen to them. And I get it why people get so upset where they see things that they feel have been done wrong.
Hmm.
But there's also a degree of perspective that I think we need to regain, that shaving a leg is not torture, right? Like and it was in
Yeah.
the process of, especially if it's a pet that like if they're have a hemo abdomen and they're extraordinarily hypotensive, and especially if that's a client that wants that pet to still survive, placing a catheter in a severely hypotensive patient is a prudent decision to make, right? And especially if you got to act now, it's a reasonable thing. And in the process of doing that, shaving the leg is normal. Like those kinds of situations,
Yeah.
you depend on your client being able to understand that you're trying to help.
Yeah.
So I get it, as all vets unfortunately have to
It's
experience that.
it's a tough one.
Yeah,
It's
and it's unfortunate it's an increasing problem.
yeah.
And I don't think anyone has a good solution to how to bridge that understanding.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you'd agree with this. It's a deeper thing than just veterinary medicine. It comes down
Oh,
to
it's happening, yeah,
yeah,
other industries
society
as
as
well,
a whole.
it as a whole. But yeah, like I said, talking to older vets, they have straight up said it is a new thing. There used to be much more understanding in the past and a much more conscious effort to say, okay, it's not what I would have wanted, but
Hmm.
I understand that you were trying to help. I think that's been lost, and
Yeah.
it sounds like they agree. So it's tough. But
Yeah.
sorry
Anyway,
that you
yeah,
had that.
that's
But
okay. I mean,
yeah,
obviously,
and that feels
that's
negative. I
it is
don't
what it
want to
is. We
say
ended
that.
on a negative note, but overall, I'm happy that your year is starting off. So is mine,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, we got nothing to complain about. Big things coming up in our lives. What we'll do is again, we're going to be coming out with an episode every week. I promise the next week's going to be way positive. Maybe we might even just cut out the sarcoma overall. We'll do a double OMA. You know,
Maybe you could just aggregate all the sarcomas into a single podcast. You're like, watch this if you want to be sad.
and
I
then
don't know.
watch all the
But
OMAs if you want to be positive.
yeah. No, but honestly, it like we talked about earlier, VMX was awesome.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. I'm excited to go next year. Like
yeah.
it
I
was
wish we can go to Western this year, but it's just too close.
the timing, yeah, it was hard this year. But yeah, it was a really good conference and Vegas being Vegas, it's a fun
Gotta go.
place to go. All right,
All
next
right.
time.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. We'll catch you later.
See you later.